go? Can you go down low? How low can you go, Indiana Fever? Jeez, you guys have just turned this organization into a flat-out joke. All of a sudden, Sophie Cunningham is hurt. All of a sudden, her elbow's messed up. Y'all smell that? Smells like BS. It smells like some punishment is being served out to Sophie Cunningham.
Picture this. It's Sunday, August 2nd, 2026. Outside Target Center in Minneapolis, two separate crowds have gathered hours before tip-off. On one side, fans holding golden balloons shaped like the number 8, waving "Thank you, Sophie" signs and chanting her name like she's some kind of folk hero. On the other side, counter-protesters waving transgender pride flags, holding signs of their own, responding to every chant. Police are stationed between them, news cameras are rolling, and none of this, not a single second of it, has anything to do with a basketball game. Inside the arena, a different kind of tension is building. Minnesota Lynx head coach Cheryl Reeve, one of the most decorated coaches in the WNBA history, walks onto the sideline. Underneath her blazer, she's wearing a shirt, light blue, 3 words, "Trans kids belong." She knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't hiding it. She stood there in full view of the cameras, of the fans, of the Indiana Fever bench, and coached her team to a 108-100 victory. Somewhere on that Fever bench sat Sophie Cunningham, number 8, 6'1", 30 games into what was supposed to be one of the most exciting WNBA seasons in recent memory. And whether you love her or despise her right now, you cannot deny one thing. Sophie Cunningham has turned the entire league upside down. Not with a flagrant foul, not with a game winner, with words, with an opinion, with a choice to say out loud what a lot of people in this country believe, and a lot of others find genuinely harmful. This is the story of how one ESPN interview became a national flashpoint, how a backup guard became more controversial than the biggest star in women's basketball, how the Indiana Fever found themselves trying to hold together a team, a brand, and a roster, while their locker room became the center of a culture war that the WNBA has no clean answer for. Stay with this, because the full picture is wilder than the highlights you've been seeing on social media. To understand why Sophie Cunningham's words landed like a grenade, you first have to understand how she got here, how a Missouri-born reserve guard became one of the most recognizable faces in a league that nobody outside of hardcore fans could name players in just 3 years ago. Cunningham has spent 7 WNBA seasons being exactly what most teams overlook: physical, loud, unapologetic, and genuinely difficult to play against. She scores off the bench, she takes charges, she talks trash, and for most of her career, the casual fan had no idea who she was. Then Caitlin Clark arrived. When Clark entered the league in 2024, she came in with a target already painted on her back. The hype, the expectations, the money she was bringing through the door, all of it made her a walking bullseye in a league where veterans felt overlooked and underpaid for years. Opponents challenged her. Hard contact became routine, and the referees, to the deep frustration of Fever fans, seemed to let a lot of it go. Clark needed someone. Not a publicist, not a teammate who offered nice words in the locker room. She needed someone willing to take the punishment alongside her. Sophie Cunningham became that person, and the moment that made it undeniable happened on June 17, 2025. In a game against the Connecticut Sun, J.C. Sheldon poked Clark in the eye. Later in the game, Marina Mabrey gave Clark a blindside shove to the floor. The Fever were furious. The league upgraded Mabrey's foul retroactively, but in the moment, the refs swallowed their whistles. Cunningham did not swallow anything. She grabbed Sheldon and brought her to the floor during a drive to the basket. Both players were ejected. The video went viral within hours. Here's what made it different from a typical brawl clip. Cunningham showed zero remorse. She posted a trolling photo on social media afterward, wearing a Pacers sweatshirt like she'd just gotten back from a casual night out. No apology, no explanation, just a picture that said everything about who she is. The internet lost its mind. She went from WNBA footnote to cultural lightning rod overnight. Brand deals followed. A security company partnered with her specifically because of that moment. Her podcast, Show Me Something, started pulling real numbers. But it wasn't just the chaos she was willing to create, it was why she created it. Cunningham said it plainly at the time. The refs had a lot to do with that. It was a buildup of a couple of years of them just not protecting the star player of the WNBA. At the end of the day, I'm going to protect my teammates. That's what I do.
That quote tells you everything about how Sophie Cunningham sees her role. She is an enforcer, a protector, and above everything else, she is someone who says what she believes regardless of the consequences. Which, it turns out, is a quality that works brilliantly in a brawl and becomes deeply complicated when the topic shifts from basketball to politics. And then came the elbow in that game against the Lynx. She took a shot clean to the jaw, and the refs called the foul against her. Some things never change. It started, as so many of these things do, with a question nobody expected to explode. On July 21, 2026, ESPN published a lengthy feature profile on Sophie Cunningham. It was supposed to be a celebration of her rising stardom, the personality, the fashion, the memes, the enforcer image. But somewhere in that interview, the reporter asked about her political views, and Cunningham answered honestly. She said she opposed transgender athletes competing in girls' and women's sports. She framed it as protection, saying she was trying to look out for young girls in a locker room and for competitive fairness in women's sport more broadly. She also pushed back hard on what she described as a mischaracterization of her position. "I got a lot of negative feedback about me hating trans," she said, "and I'm like, I never once said that. I think that I am here to extend love." That nuance, the distinction between opposing a specific policy and harboring hatred toward a group of people, got largely buried in the reaction. Within hours, the clip spread across social media. Supporters called her brave, principled, and exactly the kind of athlete willing to say what others were afraid to say. Critics called her dangerous, harmful, and irresponsible for using a public platform to amplify rhetoric they argue puts vulnerable young people at risk. The debate had no middle ground. It never does anymore. What made this particularly combustible for the Fever is the timing and the context. The Supreme Court had just upheld state bans on transgender athletes competing in girls' sports in June of this year, making the issue front-page news again across the country. Cunningham's comments didn't just land in a vacuum. They landed at the exact moment when this debate was already boiling at the national level. And because of who Sophie Cunningham had become, because of the Clark connection, because of the viral moments, because of the fan base that had built up around her, her words carried weight that a typical reserve player's words never would have. She doubled down before the next game. Standing at a podium, given every opportunity to soften her position, she chose not to. She said she commended people who were bold and courageous enough to speak their truths. That single line handed fuel directly to the organizers who were already planning rallies outside Fever road games. Rallies began appearing, Portland first, then the road trip continued, and what was supposed to be a run of games where the Fever were surging, they were on a 5-game winning streak, Caitlin Clark had just recorded her 4th career triple-double, suddenly became something else entirely. Every arena became a protest site. Every game had a subplot that had nothing to do with basketball. But here's the thing that gets lost in the noise. Nobody in the Fever organization called her a liar. Nobody on the roster threw her under the bus, and the league itself went conspicuously quiet. That silence, as it turns out, was its own statement. Put yourself in the Indiana Fever's position for a second. You have Caitlin Clark, the most valuable individual asset women's basketball has ever produced, putting up 21.2 points, 4 rebounds, and 8.2 assists per game.
You have a team finally competing at a level that suggests a real championship run is possible. And you have a reserve guard, beloved by your fan base, a genuine personality, a proven teammate, who just stepped into the middle of one of the most divisive debates in the country.
What do you do? The Fever's answer was carefully constructed, diplomatically worded, and pleased almost nobody. Their official statement read, "We are committed to welcoming fans from every background and treating everyone with respect, and that's what guides us as an organization." They made clear they had no intention of suspending Cunningham for her beliefs, which is factually reasonable. She expressed a political opinion, not a threat. But framing a statement around welcoming all fans when your player has just made millions of LGBTQ+ fans feel unwelcome is a tightrope walk that organizations rarely survive cleanly. Coach Stephanie White was more revealing. She admitted in a media session that there is frustration within the organization over the distraction the controversy has created. She said she doesn't believe exclusion is an answer. That's not the same as neutrality. That's a coach quietly signaling that she and her player are not aligned, while carefully avoiding anything that looks like a public reprimand. Here's what made it worse. The Fever started shielding Cunningham and Clark from the media. After the game in Portland, reporters noted that Clark, who was listed as available for the post-game press conference, was replaced by Kelsey Mitchell, despite being the team's leading scorer and assist leader that night. Neither Clark nor Cunningham was made available for non-basketball questions. A Fever PR representative literally stepped in front of Stephanie White mid-question to read a prepared statement when a reporter tried to ask about Cunningham's comments and the rally that had gathered outside the arena. That move, however understandable from a damage control perspective, backfired immediately. You cannot spend weeks building a brand around two of the most outspoken personalities in women's sports, players who build followings precisely because they say what they think, and then try to hide them from a question. It just raises more questions. And in the world of sports commentary and social media, a non-answer is always interpreted as confirmation of something. The organization has addressed everything else publicly. They went out of their way to respond to criticism about the team's entertainment value. Their social media team posted, "Are you not entertained?" after a game. Stephanie White has addressed fan complaints, roster decisions, officiating concerns, all of it on the record. The one thing they refused to address head-on was the smear campaign narrative swirling around the team and the Cunningham controversy as a distraction from within. And when an organization refuses to address something specific while addressing everything else, people notice. There are coaches who avoid controversy at all costs, who give non-answers about non-basketball topics, redirect every question back to film study and defensive rotations, and treat political opinions as something that belongs outside the arena walls. Cheryl Reeve is not that coach. She never has been. Reeve is a four-time WNBA champion as a head coach. She is blunt, demanding, and famously old school in her approach to the game. Sophie Cunningham herself praised Reeve in 2025 for how she embraced the viral stud-bud streaming phenomenon with her players, noting that Reeve being willing to loosen up was a sign of genuine evolution. There was mutual respect between these two, even across franchise lines. That history made what happened on August 2nd more complicated than a simple rivalry moment. The day before the Fever arrived in Minneapolis, Reeve held a media session and went directly at the issue. She said she comes from a space of inclusion. She said, "We need to protect transgender kids." She pushed back on the framing that transgender athletes represent the biggest problem in women's sports, arguing there are far older and more deeply embedded inequities: lack of equal facilities, lack of pay equity, lack of media coverage, that women's sports have never fully resolved. Problematic, she said, is suggesting that transgender athletes are the central threat to the game.
Then on Sunday, she walked out in that shirt. ESPN's broadcast team highlighted it on air during the game. The stadium, which has long been one of the most LGBTQ+ friendly environments in the WNBA, filled with fans wearing shirts of their own. Trans kids belong in sports. For supporters of Cunningham in the stands, it felt like the arena itself had taken a side. What happened at mid-court before the game, though, is the moment everyone is still talking about. Cameras caught Reeve and Cunningham standing together at center court, having what appeared to be a long, serious conversation. Nobody could hear what was said. Both women kept composed. Nobody raised a voice. And in the postgame, Reeve gave perhaps the most carefully considered quote of this entire situation. "I think it's great. I think both of us understand we have platforms. We both talked about wanting to, more than anything, educate." Cunningham, for her part, did not back down. She did not appear shaken. Witnesses said she held eye contact, kept her posture, gave as good as she received. Whoever walked away from that conversation believing they'd changed the other person's mind was probably mistaken, but both of them walked away standing upright. The Lynx then proceeded to beat the Fever 108-100. Minnesota is the top team in the WNBA right now. The Fever's bench wasn't deep enough. Their lack of length showed. And suddenly, the question being asked in Indiana wasn't just about politics. It was about whether all of this off-court noise was beginning to cost them on it. By the time the Fever arrived in Minneapolis, it was the third consecutive road game where organized demonstrations had gathered outside the arena. Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis. 3 cities, 3 sets of opposing crowds, 3 games where the conversations inside the press box, in the stands, and on social media had almost nothing to do with the actual basketball being played. In Portland, Cunningham was booed by the Moda Center crowd the moment she stepped onto the court. Many fans waved small transgender pride flags. She walked out, caught the ball, and played her game. She scored 13 points. The Fever won 11-12-98, and Clark hit that 4th career triple-double. Whatever was happening outside, Cunningham did not let it affect her play. You can debate everything about her politics, but the composure she showed in that building, being booed by thousands of people the moment she appeared, was not nothing. Outside, a woman named Amy Souza told reporters she was there to be a cheerleader for Sophie Cunningham, who so bravely put her head above the parapet to protect women and girls. She had organized a group specifically to show up and show support. The counterpoint was equally intense. Protesters were loud, organized, and made their presence felt throughout the night. And both sides knew they were being filmed. Both sides knew this moment was bigger than one game. The fan who printed 100 "Thank You Sophie" posters for Minneapolis joked, "You've always got to make a friend with a printer." People in the crowd held golden balloons with the number 8 on them, full-sized posters of Cunningham. Some traveled from out of state. Meanwhile, those who came out to push back on her comments were equally determined and equally visible. The Lynx's core LGBTQ fan community filled the upper bowl in clear solidarity with Reeve's message. What does all of this mean for the league? It means the WNBA, which has spent 2 years riding an unprecedented wave of mainstream attention, mostly driven by Caitlin Clark's arrival, is now facing a test it was not prepared for and has no obvious playbook to handle. The league's statement on Cunningham's comments was silence. Not a carefully worded response, not a press conference, silence. And that silence is being read differently depending on who you ask. Some argue the WNBA is protecting Cunningham because the Fever are their biggest commercial asset right now. Others argue the league is paralyzed, afraid that any action against Cunningham will be seen as political suppression by one half of the fan base, and that any inaction is seen as endorsement by the other. There is no clean play here. There never is when sports gets pulled directly into a culture war this sharp.
What's certain is this. The Fever have a co-owner who was reportedly barred from games for 5 games as a result of the fallout. The White House reportedly weighed in on the situation. And a reserve player, not the coach, not the GM, not the franchise superstar, became the single most talked about figure in the league for 3 straight weeks. That has never happened in the WNBA before. Maybe it's never happened quite like this in any women's sports league. Here's the part that everyone is dancing around, but nobody wants to say directly.
This situation has exposed something fragile about the moment women's basketball is living through right now. The WNBA's growth, the sold-out arenas, the television ratings, the merchandise, the cultural relevance is real, but it is also newer and more delicate than the headlines suggest. The league's explosion in visibility is tied to a handful of specific stars and a specific energy. Clark is the centerpiece, but the personalities around her, Cunningham's fearlessness, the team's combative identity, are part of what makes it compelling. Remove any of that, and you risk losing the thing that made the audience show up in the first place. At the same time, the WNBA has long been one of the most openly pro-LGBTQ leagues in professional sports. That community has supported women's basketball through the lean years, the near-empty arenas, the tiny contracts, the constant fight for media coverage. Asking that community to simply absorb Cunningham's comments with no organizational response is its own kind of statement. There's no easy answer, and anyone who tells you there is, on either side of this, is selling something. The Fever have a roster that needs to compete. Clark has a potential historic season to protect. Cunningham has a right to her beliefs and has said she extends love to everyone, even those who disagree with her. Reeve has a team to coach and a community to stand by. And the WNBA has a league to protect in the middle of the most important growth window it has ever had. What happens next matters more than most people realize. If the Fever go on a deep playoff run, does any of this get remembered? If they underperform, does the chaos of this summer get blamed? Does Clark's recurring back issue, a genuine injury concern the team has been managing carefully all season, become part of the narrative? Does the team's inability to address the controversy directly cost them in the locker room, in the standings, in the fan base? Sophie Cunningham said she's not concerned about being a distraction. At the end of the day, I come in and I do my job, she said. And by the numbers, that's true. She's playing, scoring, and competing. But the ripple effects of what she started on July 21st are still spreading. 3 arenas, 2 sides, one team trying to hold itself together while the country decides what it thinks. Whatever you believe about the politics, and this is genuinely one of those topics where smart, decent people land in completely different places, the basketball question underneath all of it is real. Can a team maintain championship focus when their bench player becomes a symbol of something much bigger than the game? Can Caitlin Clark deliver the historic season she's capable of with this kind of noise surrounding her? And when Cheryl Reeve and Sophie Cunningham stood at mid-court and talked to each other, what exactly did they say to each other? Nobody outside those 2 women knows the answer. And somehow that conversation, 2 people standing face to face, cameras rolling, neither one willing to flinch, might be the most honest thing that happened in the WNBA all summer. Drop your take in the comments. Are you with Sophie or with Reeve? And do you think the Fever can still make a championship run with all of this swirling around them? Hit the like button, subscribe, and don't miss the next update because this story is nowhere close to being over.